Hello students, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to start the chapter Fritz by Satyajit Ray. It is a part of the prose section from your ISC 2024 syllabus. Now Fritz written by Satyajit Ray is unique because it falls under the category of Indian literatures in English translation. In a multilingual society like India, translation is important because it enables us to understand the diverse customs present in different regions of India. Fritz is written by the celebrated filmmaker and author Satyajit Ray. Satyajit Ray's father, the prominent author Sukumar Ray, was a close associate of Rabindranath Tagore. Satyajit Ray also attended Bishwabharati University established by Tagore. There he was tutored by the greats of Bengal Renaissance, artists like Nandalal Bose, Binod Bihari Mukherjee, both of whom had an extraordinary impact on Ray's sense of aesthetics and his later creative choices. Tagore's political ideology as well as his creative genius also influenced Ray greatly. We find Tagore's influence in the structure of this particular prose piece as well. We will analyze that later, but first we will start with the text directly. After having stared at Jayanto for a whole minute, I could not help asking him, "Are you well? You seem to be in low spirits today." Please note that right at the beginning, we are instantly drawn into the text. We find no formal introduction or conventional introduction. We are introduced to the character Jayanto, and it perhaps indicates that the entire story will revolve around Jayanto because he has been introduced at the very first line of the story. Jayanto quickly lost his slightly preoccupied air. Preoccupied means someone who is deep in thought. Gave me a boyish smile. So we see that the narrator notices that Jayanto is distracted. On being asked, he responds in his usual boyish charm and he says, "No, on the contrary, I'm feeling a lot better. This place is truly wonderful. You have been here before, didn't you? Didn't you know how good it was?" So this is the narrator's question. The narrator asks that, "Didn't you know how good this place was?" Jayanto answers, "I had nearly forgotten." Jayanto sighed. "Now some of my memories are coming back slowly. The bungalow certainly appears unchanged. I can even recognize some of the old furniture, such as these cane chairs and tables." The bearer came in with tea and biscuits on a tray. I poured. So the narrator poured and the bearer came in. So from this particular conversation, we understand that the narrator and his friend is on a vacation and this place was earlier visited by Jayanto. "When did you come here last?" 31 years ago. "I was 6 then." So Jayanto answers that it was almost 31 years ago. So it was quite a long time ago. In the next paragraph, we will see that the author presents a conventional description of the characters. Not only does he present their present situation, but he also speaks a little bit about their background and about the friendship between these two characters. We were sitting in the garden of the circuit house in Bundi. We had arrived only that morning. Jayanto and I were old friends. We had gone to the same school and college. He now worked in the editorial division of a newspaper, and I taught in a school. Although we had different kinds of jobs, it had not made any difference to our friendship. We had been planning a trip to Rajasthan for quite some time. The main difficulty lay in both of us being able to get away together. That had at last been made possible. So, despite their professional difficulties, they finally managed to go on a vacation together, and we see that they have remained friends for a very long time since school. So we understand that their friendship is important and they are well connected with one another. Most people go to Jaipur, Udaipur or Chittor when they go to Rajasthan. But Jayanto kept talking about going to Bundi. I had no objection for having read Tagore's poem, The Fort of Bundi. So, the narrator was also quite enthusiastic about going to Bundi and especially about seeing the fort because he had read Tagore's poem, The Fort of Bundi. I was certainly familiar with the name of the place and felt a pleasurable excitement at the prospect of actually seeing the fort. Prospect means chance. So the narrator felt fortunate that now he will get a chance to see the fort. Not many people came to Bundi, but that did not mean that there was not much to see there. It could be that from the point of view of a historian, Udaipur, Jodhpur and Chittor had a lot more to offer. But simply as a beautiful place, Bundi was perfect. So we see most commonly visited places in Rajasthan are Jaipur, Udaipur or Chittor. However, we find that on Jayanto's insistence, they decided to travel to Bundi. Though Bundi was not historically significant, yet it was beautiful and unique in its own simple way. The circuit house, let's move on to the previous paragraph. However, Jayanto's insistence on Bundi did puzzle me somewhat. Though it was a perfect place, though Bundi was naturally beautiful, yet Jayanto's constant insistence somehow made the narrator question or made the narrator a little confused, a little puzzled. I learned the reason on the train when we were coming down. Jayanto's father, Animesh Das Gupta, had worked in the archaeological department. Now, what do we understand by archaeological department? Archaeology generally deals with excavating certain relics or excavating. By excavating, I mean digging up from the ground certain relics, and by studying those relics, they gain information about the prehistoric times. So, in such a department, Animesh Das Gupta, Jayanto's father, worked, and as a result, he was posted to different historical places. His work sometimes took him to historical places, and Jayanto had, as a child, come to Bundi. He had always wanted to return after growing up just to see how much the modern Bundi compared to the image he had in his mind. So he wanted to compare, he wanted to return, he had an image in his mind and he wanted to compare that image to the modern Bundi. Now, it is important to note that certain places that we visit in our childhood remain etched in our minds, and we feel a strange longing towards those places. Jayanto also felt a similar urge to return to Bundi because he felt a sort of connection to this particular place. The circuit house was really rather splendid. So they were staying in a circuit house, in that old circuit house where Jayanto had lived when he came with his father 31 years ago. The circuit house was really rather splendid, built during the time of the British. It must have been at least 100 years old. It was a single storied building with a sloping tiled roof. So it was built during the British period. So the structure was quite different from the conventional houses that we find around. It had a sloping roof. It was single storied and it was tiled. The rooms had high ceilings and the skylights had long dangling ropes which could be pulled to open and shut them. Skylights were a kind of window. The skylights would be used in order to allow light to come in, and those skylights could be opened and closed with the help of a dangling rope. The veranda faced the east. Right opposite it was a huge garden with a large number of roses in full bloom. Behind these were a lot of trees which obviously housed a vast section of local birds. Parrots could be seen everywhere and peacocks could be heard, but only outside the compound. So we almost get a photographic detail of the setting. And it has been deliberately done by the author. We had already been on a sightseeing tour of the town. The famous fort of Bundi was placed amidst the hills. We had seen it from a distance that day, but decided to go back to take a closer look. The only reminders of modern times were the electric poles. So we get an indication that that Bundi was no way similar to the familiar city life that we are used to. It is still like the older times. The only reminder of modern times were the electric poles. Otherwise, it seemed as though we were back in old Rajputana. Old Rajputana is it was the time when the Rajputs ruled Rajasthan. It was around 6 to 12, it was around the time, it was between 6th to 12th century. The streets were cobbled, so the streets were also placed with old fashioned stones and it was cobbled. The houses had balconies jutting out. Jutting out means it was sticking out from the first floor. The carvings done on these and the wooden doors bore evidence of the work of master craftsmen. So the doors were also elaborately decorated and everything was old fashioned but uniquely beautiful. It was a quaint little town. It was difficult to believe we were living in the age of machines. So we see that the author creates a setting which is unfamiliar and isolated, and it is deliberately done so that the author can create a space where the boundaries between reality and fiction can easily merge, where we see that the author deliberately alters the occurrences of our daily lives and makes space for supernatural things and makes space for supernatural elements to unfold. we move on to the next portion. I noticed Jayanto had turned rather quiet after arriving in Bundi. Perhaps some of his memories had returned. It is easy enough to feel a little depressed when visiting a place one may have seen as a child. Besides, Jayanto was certainly more emotional than most people. Everyone knew that. So, we see that the narrator notices that Jayanto was unusually distracted and quiet since his arrival at Bundi. And he assumes that it is perhaps Jayanto is reminded of his childhood days and he is feeling somewhat unhappy because of that. He put his cup down on the table and said, "He here is Jayanto. You know, Shankar, it is really quite strange. The first time I came here, I used to sit cross legged on these chairs. It seemed as though I was sitting on a throne. Now the chairs seem both small in size and very ordinary. The drawing room here used to seem absolutely enormous. If I hadn't returned, those memories would have remained stuck in my mind forever." So now we find Jayanto is actively comparing his image to the reality that he sees now, and we see that he's somewhat disturbed. And we find that our narrator Shankar tries to reason with Jayanto and tries to put his mind at ease. And he says, "I said, yes, that's perfectly natural. As a child, one is small in size, so everything else seems large. One grows bigger with age, but the size of all other things remains the same, doesn't it?" So this is how Shankar tries to explain to Jayanto that it is all right. There is nothing wrong in feeling the way he is feeling at the moment. And he tries to put his mind at ease. We went for a stroll in the garden after tea. Jayanto suddenly stopped walking and said, "Deodar." So a strange incident starts happening the moment they start walking. That is, stroll means to walk in a leisurely manner. Once they take this stroll around the garden, Jayanto suddenly acts very differently. And he says, he stops walking and suddenly says, "Deodar." Deodar is the name of a particular tree. I stared at him. "A deodar tree? It ought to be here somewhere," he said, and began striding towards the far end of the compound. Striding is he walks very decisively as if he knows where he is going, and he walks towards the far end of the compound. Why did he suddenly think of a deodar tree? A few seconds later, I heard his voice exclaiming jubilantly, "Yes, it's here." Jubilantly is extremely happily. He is extremely happy to have located the deodar tree that he was looking. "Yes, it's here, exactly where it was before." Of course it is where it was before," I said. The narrator said. "Would a tree go roaming about?" So the author, the narrator or the author Shankar here, he seems extremely confused by the way his friend behaves. Please note, it is not the author but the narrator Shankar. I had mentioned author and narrator at the same breath, but it is the narrator, it will not be the author. So please note that. So we find that the narrator says, "Of course it is where it was before. Would a tree go roaming about?" Jayanto shook his head impatiently. "No, that is not what I meant. All I meant was that the tree is where I thought it might be." So it is quite strange in itself that after 31 years, Jayanto remembers about this one strange deodar tree and he is able to locate it. "But why did you suddenly think of a tree?" Jayanto stared at the trunk of the tree, frowning. That is, he made his face. He was scowling. He was staring at the trunk as if he was trying to remember something, but he's not being able to recollect the specific details of the incident. Then he shook his head slowly and said, I can't remember that now. Something had brought me near the tree. I had done something here. A European. European? So the narrator is further confused because it seems incoherent. Whatever Jayanto was saying now seems incoherent. No, I can't recall anything at all. So the narrator, after narrator's question, Jayanto is unable to answer Shankar properly, and he says that no, I am unable to remember anything for sure. Memory is a strange business, and see, the line ends in an ellipsis that indicates that Jayanto did not have anything significant to add after this. However, in the next paragraph, we see that he slowly starts recollecting few incidents from his past. They had a good cook in the circuit house. Later in the evening, while we sat at the oval dining table having dinner, Jayanto said, the cook they had in those days was called Dilawar. He had a scar on his left cheek and his eyes were always red. But he was an excellent cook. Jayanto's memories began returning one by one. Soon after dinner, when we went back to the drawing room, he could recall where his father used to sit and smoke a chirut. Chirut is a cigar with both ends open, where his mother used to knit, and what magazines lay on the table. So he could recall all these smaller details. And slowly, in bits and pieces, he recalled the whole business about his doll. Now, this particular phrase, the whole business about his doll, again instantly makes the reader extremely curious. We stop here for the day. The next part of the story will be dealt in the next video, and I promise it will not take as long as it did for this video to come up. So please be patient, and if you like my work, please subscribe to my channel, and please comment if there is anything, any particular chapter, any portion that you would want me to address in my videos. Thank you so much.